today I'm very excited to have friend and colleague Bill Taylor from San Diego on the call. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, thank you, Corey. This is a real treat. From all the way down in San Diego, all the way up to Canada, here we are enjoying some time together. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. What's the weather like in San Diego today?
Well, it's kind of the standard fare for us. We are weather wimps down here, as you know. So it's going to be 73 today, partially sunny in the morning. Sun will come out in the afternoon. I live 4 miles from the beach. So anybody watching this that comes from a foul weather area, I'm a weather wimp. What can I say? I'm lucky to live here.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I visited a couple times in my life, and I love it every time. I mean, it's the hub of so much down there. And
yeah, we're very fortunate. Yeah.
Well, before we begin, I'm just going to give a brief bio for those that may not know who you are yet, Bill. So I'm going to read that, and then I really want to get into things and hear more about kind of your founder story of how we got here.
Okay.
But, Bill, you've been doing sales for 30 years in the sales leadership, P&L C-suite experience. Plus, you've been a global master facilitator, executive coaching, talent consulting, and you help design, develop, and deliver custom performance solutions. I got your purpose statement from your LinkedIn, and I love this, and I want to share with the viewers. I aspire to serve everyone I meet, helping them experience self-discovery, unleash potential for transformation, deliver results, and enjoy personal fulfillment where they live, work, play, and serve. Your consulting company, One Line of Sight, has multiplied your global capabilities, working strategically with the following best-in-class consulting firms: Lee Hecht Harrison, Mentor Group, and Harvard Business Corporate Learning.
Yeah.
That's pretty darn impressive. Tell us, how did you get to where you're at, that you've been given these tremendous blessings?
Yeah.
And then get to turn that into blessing other people you serve.
Yeah. I appreciate using the word blessing because that means a lot to me. It means it's part of my personal faith journey. I consider everything I do as a gift and to be a good steward of it. But the quick story is, because it's about 30 years in duration, is that I made a career change back in the early 90s as a bank executive in San Diego, and went through a recession. And lost my job, and the bank got bought, and I had to change careers, and I went into this crazy world of training and development. And I just started carrying a bag. And I started out as an individual contributor. I was an executive VP one day and carrying a bag the next. And it was very humbling. And I found out I fell in love with the whole concept and industry of developing people to become even better than they might imagine. Teams, leaders, organizations. And along the way, as I was selling stuff, and I was very successful at it, I've always been kind of a rainmaker guy. My clients started saying, well, Bill, why don't you deliver it? Because you understand us as executives. You're a P&L guy. You're a business guy. You're not from just training or HR. And so I had to get permission to do that. And it was fun. And I started a journey of becoming what many folks have called me as a hybrid. I'm a, professional sales manager, sales executive background, P&L background, but along the way became a facilitator and an executive coach, and fell in love with that. You fast forward a couple decades, and I was working for a very large firm called Center for Creative Leadership, CCL as many people call it, and running the Western Region Business Development Team. And I was also facilitating and coaching. And a good friend of mine said, Bill, you ought to do this full time. You're so good with people. You're having there's a lot of joy in your life. We see you up front coaching or facilitating. And that sparked the next step of my journey. And so in 2010, I left CCL and started what's been a 10-year journey to become a full-time practitioner, executive coach, consultant, master facilitator, online as well as in the classroom. And now that's my identity, but I'm also a guy with a lot of sales and business development background. And so that led to finally hanging out my shingle 5 years ago. And I was struggling to figure out the name of my little solo practitioner, solo consultancy, One Line of Sight. And a good buddy of mine was asking me about it, helping me. And I would often use the term line of sight or alignment. That means a lot to me. And he said, well, tell me about that. And I said, well, when I was a quarterback in college, and I was fortunate enough to play quarterback on scholarship and also try out for the San Diego Chargers at one point. I said my quarterback coach would yell at me and say, what line of sight were you on when you threw the ball? Were you looking at the correct thing? And he said, you've got to have one line of sight, Bill. And suddenly it dawned on me and my friend, when that's it. So one line of sight really implies that in organizations, individuals, and teams, the biggest lever I think I can pull and help them with and serve them is to help them get into alignment. Sort of, what is the charter for our team? What's the purpose we exist, or the organization? What are our roles and responsibilities? How are we going to measure success? What's our dashboard? What's our metrics? And finally, if I'm on a team or an individual, how do my responsibilities and metrics link directly up to the organization's strategic objectives? One line of sight from any perspective in the organizational chart. So that's where it showed up. And now I have a dual sort of split focus practice where one day I'm in the B2B sales world where you and I met with Mentor. I'm doing executive coaching one-on-one and team development and culture change the next day. So it's really been fun. It's really been a great journey.
Well, it's cool. And, the background before you were in sales was actually sport and as a quarterback. And I'm thinking as consultants, there's a pretty good parallel between quarterbacking a team, and you did it in college on the full ride, as well as a walk-on for, an NFL team, which anyone that gets to that level is a high performer. You're in the top 1% of, the athletes. And I mean, the quarterback is arguably the toughest position to even get. Because really, when on the field, at least on offense, they're it, right? Yeah. They're literally quarterbacking what goes on. And draw the parallel between the training that you had from the sport to sales and business.
Yeah, I love that question. I think that anyone that's interested in high performance, either individually or on a team or an organization, certainly realizes, in the lessons I learned, I think you were an athlete for most of your early career, yes. is that when you have an innate skill, and I could just throw a football farther and harder than most people, now it's just a gift. But I didn't know how to be a passer, so I turned into I went from a thrower to a passer with remarkable amounts of training, individual coaching, correction, repetitions. Who knows how many balls I threw from 8th grade to the NFL. And I think the parallel of being a high-performing athlete and a high-performing consultant or coach is that there's this implied and explicit, you've got to practice. I still practice being a coach. I have a coach to help me be a better coach. I'm a facilitator. I have people watch my videos or come on and watch me in the back of the room for one purpose only. What am I doing well, and what could I improve on? So here I am 30 years into my career. You can pretty much toss me anywhere in any room in any part of the world, and I'm going to probably perform pretty well, but I'm not done yet. I've got to continue to fine-tune, excel, get rid of bad habits I fall back into. And I think that's the parallel in business. As a business executive, I was always getting better and better and better because I asked for feedback. And I think when you get in alignment personally, like with a purpose statement like you just shared, and I'm grateful for you sharing that, that keeps me in alignment. The third word in that purpose statement is serve. It's aspire to serve. I'm not there yet. I aspire to serve. And so I keep working on my craft, keep working how to look at the camera here, like we were doing, instead of looking over there. I'm always practicing. And I think that's the thing. I love to coach people who finally say, Bill, I need to practice what I do instead of just wing it. So I guess that's how I would characterize that, Corey.
I love it. And that's one thing high performers, all exhibit is they love feedback and they want to grow and develop. They, and I always, I had someone share this once and I loved it. And it was someone in pro sport. And they said, I'm looking for from my coach, what I'm doing wrong. I want the
That's right.
constructive feedback, and they want challenge. They want to fail because they're always stepping out of the comfort zone and setting new
Yeah,
baselines.
that's right.
And it's that growth mindset that Carol Dweck at Stanford talks about.
Excellent. Mm-hmm.
And the difference between that fixed mindset going, and people who are high performers don't give up as early or as quickly or as easily in the process. And it's because they have that growth mindset. And obviously that transfers. Sales is within an organization. It's the equivalent of the performance, like out of anyone that has a strongest parallel to performance, I would say the sales department is more aligned than anywhere else in an organization. There's maybe some operational or creative, but really the sales is this sort of metrics and training. And you talked about practice and the idea of deliberate practice. And, my research in that with elite level performance, people like Anders Ericsson who developed deliberate practice in the book Peak, as well as Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and the concept of flow, or that being in the zone.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Whether it's sport, sales, or business, we have to do this preparation and practice. And it's a specific way too. That it's not just doing the same thing over and over. Right.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is the more high the performers are, the more they embrace that practice in that. When you see the biographies on Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, Manning, Peyton Manning, they're the ones who are normally one of the first ones out, the last ones off.
That's right.
It's amazing that the people who, the outsiders looking in go, well, they don't need to practice. They don't need to. Out of all the people, they would be the last ones you would think that need to. Right. But it's because they're that good, they keep doing what they know got them there.
That's right. Yeah. And another analogy people use is, somebody like Tiger Woods, who has 3 coaches or 4 coaches for every single part of his game. He's got a strength coach. He's got a psychologist. He's got a putting coach. He's got a short game coach. He's got a long game coach. I mean, again, when parents talk to me, they've probably done this with you too, Corey. They say, I've got my son or my daughter that wants to play a given sport. Doesn't matter what sport it is. What's your advice for them? And I said, first of all, do they like to practice? And they usually look at me a little quizzically and they say, what do you mean? Do they like to practice? Are they excited to go practice with the team, or do they kind of withdraw and push back on that and they just want to play the game? And so why do you ask that?
Or they dread it. They're good at it, and they go and they do it, but they dread it.
You're absolutely right. And I said, I love to practice. I couldn't wait to get out to practice because I wanted to be better and better and better. And I think even now in my world of facilitation, your world of facilitation and consulting, we practice. I just read an interesting article just the other day. They were talking about presentation skill sets, and they talked about Steve Jobs, and they said he was the most amazing communicator. Well, they also got behind the curtain, and Jobs said that he used to practice minimum 15 or 20 hours, literally and live with feedback before he went out to do the presentation. They talked about an individual, a good friend of ours just did a TED Talk here locally, a woman, she's a biology professor and a good friend of ours. And I asked her, so how much did you practice? And she said, I figured I practiced it without an audience and with an audience probably 140 times for a 12-minute talk. So she did 140 repetitions and recorded herself and practiced and had a mock audience, and then got feedback on every single practice session. Then she went out and did 12 minutes, and she looked like it was the easiest thing in the world to do. But they didn't see the practice. And I'm convinced that most executives, particularly salespeople, Corey, they don't practice. Because when I coach them, I say, let's get on the video or let's get on the phone and give me your sales pitch, and I'll play the customer. And they go, okay, no sweat. So they get on, and I play customer. And I start off with something like, so what's the purpose and importance of our time together? And they stare at me and they say, well, we're so-and-so company and we do this, this, and this. I said, so no, what's the purpose of it? I read that on your website. I know all that stuff. Why are we here? Why are we here? Well, I want to explore what keeps you up at night. And I usually joke with them and say, my 2-year-old keeps me up at night. What keeps you up at night? And the salesperson then stops usually in the role play. And I'm not trying to be a hard guy, but I basically said, you're not prepared. Now, you have to call audibles like a quarterback. You have to change the play. Absolutely. But I said, you're not ready. You're not ready for the call. I just asked you one question. Why are we here? And you choked. So practice. Sales managers, go practice with your salespeople. And they don't want to do it. They say, I don't have enough time. Well, you have time to go clean up the mess when they don't do anything right. So you must have time to practice. Get on the phone an hour before the sales call and say, let's role play together. But they don't want to do it. And to your point earlier, sometimes they don't know how to do it correctly. So I model that for them. I model it. So yeah, I think this is a huge issue. And it also, again, creates line of sight. Not to sound self-serving, but if you've practiced well, it now, Corey, where you do is you move into flow more quickly. To your point, you call up flow.
And naturally, not just quicker, naturally.
Right.
You're literally, it's almost like you're zoning everything else out and you're so in the moment and what you're doing because of all the prep.
That's right.
And what happens is actually we're changing our body's neurological processes because it's the process of myelination. So if you think of electricity and like a wire, if we plug something in, it's all a whole bunch of copper wires. And the more power that's going through, the more insulation that has to be around that copper.
That's right.
And there's something in our chemistry called myelination. It's myelin. And as we practice and grow and develop, especially high performance skills, the myelin sheath around our neurological, the synapses that fire grows thicker and thicker so we can do it quicker, easier, and more logical. And, so there's a specific reason both at the logical as well as a neurological where to get in the zone, all of a sudden it becomes so automatic because it's literally then hardwired.
Well, that's a great neurological tutorial for me that I didn't know and understand. So thank you. But I think it does get back to the practical nature. When people see you facilitate or see me facilitate, they go, God, you make it look so easy. Well, in the moment, I'm calling up hundreds of hours of muscle memory or mind memory. I just got a new client the other day to do some online delivery. And they asked me, so how many times have you done delivery online? And I thankfully had actually calculated that. And I have the pleasure to do some work with Harvard for online leadership development. I said, well, in the last 3 years, I've done about 235 90-minute sessions with various audiences around the world. And I've also done some classroom work. I said recently, a new client, mentor group, I've done about 80 sessions. What I said is that doesn't count all the practice and all the recordings that I did ahead of time that were awful. I mean, I literally, recorded myself on Zoom for 90 minutes, looked at it again, and just wanted to throw up because it was so bad.
Well, we did this together. I know because
that's right.
those 80 sessions, we were doing a lot of that with each other, hopping on Zoom and doing it and giving feedback to each other. And
that's right.
Even the technical setup, it's amazing how, and even then, no matter how prepared you are, sometimes stuff comes off the rails and there's stuff outside of our control.
That's right. That's right. So, the woman that I was working with down in Australia said, so Bill, I guess you've had a few repetitions on Zoom and WebEx, right? And I said, yeah, and I'm grateful for that because I wouldn't be asking you to do this proposal to work for you if I didn't have confidence that I can do it by history, but I promise you I will practice like crazy before I go live. I promise you. That's the only way I know how to do it. I'm going to go out and get my reps. So this is a fun conversation in that regard for high performance.
I love it. Absolutely. Now, the sales side of things is really where you have a sweet spot and a lot of credibility. What are some of the, if you had to pick some of the top challenges or mistakes that are being made in sales, what would be some of the things you would pull out? And then the second part of this that we'll go to is going to be, what do you think can be done better looking forward?
Yeah, but immediately what comes to mind is two things. There was a lot of research done over several years period of time. Right now, I can't remember who to give attribution to, so forgive me. But the essence of it is that most buyers of products and services say that salespeople do two things that drive them crazy and disappoint them. One is salespeople do not listen. They're not great listeners because they're so locked up on telling people about their stuff and their features and their benefits, and they're trying to close something. The second thing that professional salespeople don't do is they don't do their research ahead of time. So there's two things. You don't know my business, and you don't listen. So when you think about how to start a sales cycle with somebody, a suspect, that's who I want to talk to, a prospect. I actually did get to speak with them. And then it moves to qualification. I now have a relationship, and they've asked me for a proposal, and I've matched up their explicit need with a explicit set of solutions. Is all of that is about a consultative, inquiry-based, I call it voracious curiosity about what's going on with them and not about my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, I don't sell stuff. Neither do you. We listen and create a psychologically safe relationship, as Amy Edmondson would call it, from Harvard. We create a space where we invite the client to tell us their story. It's not so much about my story. They've already gone on the website and know what I do. I wouldn't have got the meeting if they didn't know what the heck we did.
Well, and the research is 70% of B2B buying. They've done 70% of the research. So,
correct.
And there is no new information. So that the first point you had made about kind of that pushing and telling, the selfish side of what we have to offer and pushing that and being transactional and salesy rather than
yes.
Consultative, and that there's, and it's that reverse kind of curve. So that sales approach is very little time spent in discovery and research up front, and then trying to push hard on the close. It's proposal, or they hear one thing early on that they go, oh, we have a solution for that, and they're jumping to proposal and close. Yeah. And it's like, whoa.
I usually do a role play when I'm training people. It's somewhere it shows up with salespeople. And I say, okay, let's practice. I'm going to be the buyer and you're going to be the salesperson. And this might be a room of 15, 20 people. And I give them a fictitious, I run a large office, and we're going to get some new office furniture. We're going to move to the next building. I said, so there's my need. I need to buy new furniture and new design. And you're the architect. So I said, let's start your questions. What would you like to know? And invariably, and this is another in particular skill set, is they ask closed-ended questions that can only be answered by yes or no, instead of an open-ended question, which is invitational, asking me to give more of a narrative. And so it starts out as laughter, and then people actually get a little ticked because they'll say, so Bill, what's your budget for that? And I said, right now, I don't know. Well, are you ready to buy today? No. Bill, and they start to get frustrated because when they ask a close-ended question, I just go, yes, and pause, or I go, no, and I pause, and they're looking around at each other. And what I usually do is have them trade off. If you ask a question, you ask me a couple questions, the next person asks me, and you keep building on the knowledge. And halfway through, they don't even know what's going on until somebody finally says.
And it's circular.
It's circular, and they get frustrated. They start laughing, and then finally somebody will ask the golden question. So, Bill, thanks for being here. Would you, first of all, share your strategy and sort of the current situation you're in that's prompting you to move and, of course, replace all the furniture. And then I just spill it. I give them the story. But, it's amazing that people, and what you need to do in sales calls is prepare ahead of time and actually write those questions out. I say that to salespeople and they look at me cross-eyed. I go, why not be ready? As a matter of fact, why not send the questions ahead of time in the agenda?
Absolutely.
Why not send it ahead of time? I'd like to cover these 3 questions. And by the way, in advance, I'd like to do this and this and this. So let them see it ahead of time. And then be ready to say, thank you very much for the meeting. Is this agenda okay? Can we move forward? Okay, first question. Share with me what's going my favorite sales question that people say, what's your favorite sales question to get something started, Bill? I said, well, here's my golden nugget. Hey, I'd be curious about what's going well in the organization right now or in your department. What are you really excited about? What are the successes you're having? Salespeople look at me cross-eyed again. Why you ask them that? Because people love to tell you what's going right.
Mm-hmm.
To me to come in and say, hey, what's your gaps? What's keeping you up at night? What's your challenges? Is just rhetoric.
Yeah.
But if I say, what's going well? This is called appreciative inquiry in the world of psychology. And so it really leads to a next question of, gee, that's exciting. So what else is going on that maybe you're a bit displeased about?
Is there any challenges or gaps of where you're at and where you want to be?
Well, and they may say no, they may say yes. So I'm even going to get you on a closed-ended question.
Well, yeah. And thank you, Bill.
It's okay. But you say that leads to an open-ended question. So, wow, what else is going on? Describe some of the things you are. Explain and outline. These are open-ended kind of inquiry-based questions. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
It's fun.
Now, so we covered the challenges and the 2 big ones. I mean, are absolutely, I think anyone that's in this space knows those are the 2. And
that's right.
I don't know about you, but I get a lot of emails or LinkedIn stuff where it's obviously a template. They're literally trying to sell me something cold.
Yep.
And it's something I actually do or deliver, which is almost comical because you're like, you have not, and part of it is the marketing automation and some of the machine learning, but the reality is there's a huge risk in doing that. And when you're representing a larger organization, if your sales team's out there doing that, most balance sheets for publicly traded companies, if you look at their largest asset, it's their brand a lot of times. And every time someone goes out and does something like that, and pardon the expression, but poops the bed.
Oops.
Right? It's like, it's hitting you, not just the top line in terms of sales, it's hurting your balance sheet in terms of the brand. And that's consistent and systemic, ooh.
Yeah, you're right. It's like when I have conversations with sales professionals, there's always kind of the 4 questions that I pose to them, which is, do all of your salespeople, including you, what are the key problems that you solve for your customers? What are they? They should be maybe 3 or 4, not 15. And then the next question is, how do you solve those problems?
Right.
Third question, how do you do it differently than your competition? And the fourth one is, prove it. Give me some client success stories. Give me some testimonials.
Social proof.
I can't tell you how many training sessions or one-on-ones, and I've even done this with sales managers who say, well, my people could answer that question great. I said, well, let's find out. Let's get on a Zoom call together.
Yeah.
Get on a Zoom call, and I'll say, Jim or Sally, and the sales manager's on the call with me, right? I said, so, hey, before we begin, just curious, what are the key challenges or problems that you solve for your client here at XYZ company? And they go down some path of, we're in 65 countries and 34 languages, and we have this features and benefits. I said, no, what's, and I'll say, okay, that's nice. What are the key problems that you solve for your buyers? And they'll struggle, or they come up with a list of 15. I say, so how do you do that? What's the process? And then about then, the sales manager usually jumps in and says, okay, time out. We do not solve those problems. We don't do it that way. And then the conversation turns into hopefully a bigger consulting gig and training gig for me at that point, because it's proof of concept. They're not prepared. There's not a cadence. They don't have command of their message, as I call it. They don't have command of the sale. and you've got to have command. You got to be in flow minute one, right, Corey? You got to be
Absolutely.
in flow immediately, not work into it. And so I think that's been fun to learn over time.
Yeah. And I know, again, when I'm in doing the sales side of the business, anytime I've not done well is I'm not as prepared. I'm not in that zone.
Me too.
Like,
Me too.
Whether it's the level of research or whether it's even creating that space and breathing space in between appointments. Because if you have a real tough call and then go into another call, there's something called attention residue. And it's the switching cost, it's 20 minutes is the residue. Is what right? The research says. So if you think about that, if you aren't building in enough breathing room in between appointments, not only that, how many times have we been something run late that now all of a sudden you're ticking off real busy, really important people because you aren't doing it. And I think part of it is the performance management in sales is activity based.
Yes. Yeah, leading indicators of behavior. You're right.
Right. And yes, you have to be doing activities, but that's not enough. So, and this is why you see people just throwing out templated emails or having these sales scripts that they go through with everyone. And I think in general, the overall population with internet, social media, our sales sniffer and BS sniffer is on heightened alert. I think everything's a lot more transparent and we smell sales breath or commission breath from a mile away. Yeah,
that's a graphic analogy and metaphor. But I agree with you. We as sales professionals, and you and I have our own consulting firms, so we're constantly looking for new relationships, right?
Right.
And we need to be ready on the fly or with a lot of preparation to be articulate. And that gets back to my question of the salespeople. What are the problems you solve and how do you solve them? And they stumble all over it because they haven't practiced. I think on the other side of my world, Corey, I would add that when I work with executives, coaching executives to run their teams, and I work with teams to perform at high levels, high-performing teams, one of the things that is important that we get them to practice as well.
Yes.
And they got to tell each other, okay, we're not going to talk over each other here in the team meeting. We're not good at that, so we're going to stop doing that. It's going to look different. Sometimes I sit and observe that and give them feedback. Or the executive says that he or she doesn't delegate properly. They don't do that. So I send them back out to do that and to let the people know that they supervise, hey, I'm practicing. I need your feedback. How am I doing? Am I listening? Am I talking over to you? So just like we do in sales, I put people in role plays in team development, individual development. And how do you have constructive conversations? How do you have a tough conversation? How do you give feedback? Well, you practice. You get on the phone or you get on Zoom or you get in the meeting and I'll say, let's have a coaching call. Let's start the call out. You're ready to go. Go. And they just look at me.
Right.
Well, you screwed up, Bill. Okay, that's not a coaching call. So again, back to practice, back to research, the willingness to put the hours in to become a high performer at work. And also let's tie this to family. Unfortunately, many marriages and many relationships with kids is we aren't concerned, unfortunately, about being the best we can be. And I need feedback from my wife. I need feedback from my kids. And I'm a grandpa now. I need feedback from my grandkids. So how's Pop doing? Is this fun? Am I connecting with you the way that you like? Right. And I think there's practice there. So.
Yeah. And, fortunately or unfortunately for high performers, whether it's professional sports or, sales or even in business, to be an elite level performer, like the top of the game, you have to pay the price. There is sacrifices. So,
right.
I'm a huge MMA fan. I was a competitive boxer and got into kickboxing and did cross training
Yeah.
with MMA guys.
Wow.
And in high school, I was a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And I see what these people do and the level of cross training. They'll do, boxing, Muay Thai kickboxing. They'll do their jiu-jitsu, wrestling. They'll have like 4 or 5 practices a day and be 5 to 8 hours. And
Yeah.
some of these people have full-time jobs as well.
Yeah.
And if you have a family or a spouse or, friends, like you're giving up, you're sacrificing doing a lot of that stuff. You aren't going out for beer and nachos on a weekend.
No.
That's maybe the off season or when you aren't in a training camp.
Yeah.
And there's a paying the price and that to do that because you can't be all things to everyone. Like part of being a high performer is that focus. But I think there's a time to zoom in and then you need to zoom out. And I know that is my biggest struggle as an individual. And, I hope that in paying that price at those times, that it doesn't have long-term collateral damage. Because I found a lot of people who on the outside appear very successful. When you lift the curtain, there's been a lot of collateral damage, whether it's failed relationships, disenfranchised children or health. And
correct.
And it's
and by the way, I've done all those. I've made all those mistakes early on in my career, and I've recovered from those. But when I coach people as an executive coach or I'm doing team development, I always make this statement in some way, shape, or fashion. Hey team, hey individual, as we work on this together, I want you to know, and I want you to build a bridge and connect directly to what you're doing at home. Mm-hmm. These are life skills. You don't talk over people at work, and you don't talk over people in your family.
Yeah.
And you don't become belligerent or a bully, or you don't go away and ignore everybody. You don't do that. You're not two people. You're one person. And so when we talk about these skills, I want you to think, number one, I want you to go share it with your significant other. I want your kids to know appropriately what's going on. You're practicing. You're trying to be better than you were before. I use the phrase, you want to become even better than you are. That implies that you are good. It implies that, when I work with sales managers, I was just last week working with 15 sales managers for 4 sessions. I said, first and foremost, gents and ladies, let's level set. You guys are very, very good performers, or you wouldn't be on this webinar.
Right.
So we're looking for you to become incrementally better. 1%, 5%, 10%. We're polishing the edges here and getting them to just be brilliant. We're not using a hacksaw to get off some edges. So let's think about, yes, you're good, but how much better could you be? How much might you aspire to be even better to serve your salespeople, to serve your customers, and by the way, serve the organization you work for? And I said, I want you to think about doing that at home as well. Mm-hmm. And they usually kind of go, whoa, you're getting close. Well, yeah, I'm getting close because from my own experience, you got to do both.
Absolutely. And people talk about balance and they'll say work-life balance or work-life and then health, all these spheres in our life. And I'm going, wait. It's like a melting pot. Like, our vocational stuff goes in, our relational stuff, family stuff goes in, our physical health, diet, exercise, our outside relationships, our impact and giving, our faith-based and spiritual stuff comes in. It's all of that comes in because each one of those pieces affects the other. They're all interconnected. Yeah. And to say, you have to balance, it limits what we're doing.
Well, it does. Well, you said earlier, Dr. Dweck's work on growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I believe strongly in that. And when somebody that I'm coaching says, well, Bill, I'm a jewel, I'm a peach at home, I'm just a jerk at work. Well, that's fascinating. I frankly, with all due respect, don't believe that. I think you're a jerk. You probably mask it a little bit more, but you've bifurcated yourself as an individual. You've got two personas now. I've been there. At one point in my life, I think I had 5 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the beauty of coaching and a willingness to have a growth mindset, to be curious, to learn more, is taking that into a Venn diagram, right? And blend it together. There's full integration. So I said, and I asked somebody, I said, so can I interview your significant other and ask them this question? No. You can't. And by the way, I'll just add this. There's been some interesting research just released by Harvard and McKinsey and a few others that being at home now, significant others are actually seeing their partner act the way they act at work on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And they may tell them, oh, I'm just a mensch, I'm just a keech, everybody loves me. Suddenly they overhear these conversations. I mean, my wife is working next door. She's never worked at home before. And she goes, wow, that's an interesting conversation you just had. Well, she never heard that conversation before.
Right.
So what's happening is leaders are being found out that their narrative is not consistent. And it's causing tension at home. Fascinating that suddenly they've been found out because they can't mask it at work.
Right.
So that's a little bit of an aside. But again, I look for congruity. One of my favorite words is congruency.
Absolutely. As you were saying all of that, I'm thinking there needs to be congruence. How you can't be this over there and that over there. Right. And I've done it. We've all done it. I mean, if you're over the age of 20, because you play into roles sometimes.
That's right.
I think, quite honestly, I think part of the issue is the education system and how we're taught.
That's fair.
Right. When we're very susceptible. That's from 0 to 7 is most of our learning, and then it starts to slow, and really it doesn't cap out, but it really starts to flatline at 13. And then all you're doing is really rewiring what was there to have new learning. Like it's a very slow, but it's massive. And if you think of, okay, where is most of that learning coming? So as parents, before school, you have a lot more influence from that 0 to 5. Unless, both parents are working and you have a nanny or someone else taking care. Then you have that less. And then once they're in school, it's their peers and teachers. That's right. And and now that I've been a grandparent now for 10 years, I'm on a whole new learning curve. Actually, it's an opportunity to not screw up the way I did as a parent. You get redemption as a grandparent. But again, you see yourself show up. I see my daughter acting the way I treated her when she was a kid. I'm going, oh, that's me. And unfortunately, I think I've done that. I think every parent, and part of it, quite honestly, I almost get some sort of pleasure, in doing some of those irritating things that irritated me. I don't know. It's a bad part of my character, and I've been called out by my kids and my wife on it. There you go. And give you feedback, right? Yeah. I love it. Sometimes it's cheap entertainment too. So, and I am who I am. Yeah, that's right. But I need to be better. You become even better than you are. That's my phrase. Bingo. You can become even better. Yeah. And that's something I wanted to bring up before we get into talking about some of your high performance habits is confidence is such an important factor for anyone that has to be a high performer or in a high performing field. But confidence is a spectrum, right? Some people have low confidence, some people have high. If we go too far on confidence, it becomes what? Arrogance, right? Yeah. Which is a negative. So we need a certain amount. But what I find with high performers in whatever field is they're very humble in their practice and getting the feedback. So as much as, the pro sports stars and that, when we see them on TV and that, or out in public, how they carry themselves might look, pompous or arrogant and this ego beyond, when they're actually in their practice and that, they aren't that. That's correct. Right? That's correct. And if they are, they get weeded out. And I think of Ryan Leaf speaking of an NFL player who was a
San Diego.
quarterback, that guy had more potential than anyone coming in the league at the point, but
He did.
He had that baggage and his ego got in front of him, and that was the word on the street. And I hope for Ryan, because
he's had a tough story. I mean, I've met Ryan when he was drafted. You know, he was around the public, and I had the chance in a kind of a group setting, a fundraiser, to say hello to him and meet him.
Yeah.
He's a very disturbed, very remarkably arrogant young man.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, I mean, actually coming in, he had the reputation already. But the sad part of that story, and that's a long story, and matter of fact, I think he's had a big redemption story on the back end of that.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
You know, he's did his prison time, he's remarried, he's doing volunteer work, he's got his faith lined up. So at any rate, you know, we were basically watching him, the public here in San Diego, derail in executive coaching jargon when people have a strength that's overused, or they're under stress, or they're tired, or they're not self-regulating. It derails. The wheels come off the track.
Yep.
And we all have that. But we watched Ryan right before the public eye come off the track and crash. And it's a very, very tough story, but you're right. High performers. I mean, I went to practice and watched him throw. I'm a quarterback. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. I mean, the physical gifts alone were just stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, stunning. But no emotional intelligence, no awareness, and he didn't care. So no remorse. And it's a sad story. But I work with executives that are the same way, Corey. They say, well, that's just the way I am, Bill. That's the great phrase. Matter of fact, I said that 35 years ago when I got my first coach. That's just the way I am. I'm not much fun to work with, but I get stuff done. Just get out of my way.
Well, I made that glib comment on, saying irritating things to my kids, and you called me out on it. So we can fall into the pattern. We may know, and that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
Like we can hear or know about what we should do, but it's another thing to actually be able to do that and then be that person.
Yeah. Well, when I coach very high performers that are very arrogant and they're struggling with that, and it's been called out, one of the first things I talk to them about is that you have made a choice to be who you are. It is not the way you are. You make a choice every microsecond of every interaction right here with me and me with you of showing up the way I choose to show up.
Right.
So I said, how do I know that? I'm a recovering jerk. I went through that 35 years ago. I was a jerk. And part of it I knew, and part of it I just didn't care. I just chose to do it. Get out of my way. I was very young, very arrogant, very low emotional intelligence. And so many leaders are stunned when you work with them, whether they be in sales or the general public of a corporation. If you're going to, emotional intelligence is the number one differentiator in great leadership. I understand myself. Yes. I understand the impact of my actions on others. I understand the social interconnection of the network, and I understand how to manage that. And if I don't, I'm open to get feedback on how to make adjustments. So when people say, Bill, that's just the way I am, I go, well, I would modestly disagree. I think you choose to be that way, and I think you could choose to be different. I invite you into being different so that you are a better high performer. So I don't want to go off on the cul-de-sac here. Derailment's a big deal.
Absolutely. And this is where the importance of role models, mentors, and good, strong relationships, and sometimes that's parent, spouse. I mean, I am so grateful, like when I hear feedback from my wife and kids, because we know it's coming from love, even though sometimes they'll say something that will hurt. Yeah. Because and we have our own blind spots. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and they can pick it up.
That's correct.
And mentors and other role models can do that. And
or coaches. Yeah.
Yeah. And surrounding yourself with good people, like we see that with especially athletes or stars and movie stars or, coming from the financial services industry, that again, very high achieving type A.
That's right.
But, a lot of those personalities, there's addictive characteristics to that. We can get addicted to the work, to the success, and then that can transfer into how we handle the stress of
That's correct.
life and situations.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. That's thoughtful because, again, when you're coaching, as we both do, for high performance, whether it's I don't do any specific athletic coaching, but high performance, you have to really make a determination and assessment of whether there's a clinical issue that might be present.
Yes.
And I'm not trained clinically. So when I have worked with people who I've realized they're either deeply depressed, there's some other mental illness going on, there's something else happening that's out of my purview, coaching is not the answer. You're not going to coach your way out of depression. It's not going to be a feel-good, rah-rah deal to get you out of that. You need to go to the doctor and get a physical. You need to be evaluated. Yeah. And I've actually stopped some coaching engagements over time when I've said, my sense is that coaching needs to put on hold. You need to go take care of yourself, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, great word. So let's switch gears here for a sec.
Yeah.
You continue to take those skills you've developed over your lifetime to continue to keep up leveling and getting better and better yourself. What are some of your high performance habits that keep you being a high performer that can, impart your wisdom to other high performers?
Yeah, thank you. There's a few things come to mind immediately. One is I'm always looking for feedback. I'm always looking to how to get better. I'm interested in, even when we get done with this podcast, Corey, if it isn't today, it's going to be tomorrow. I'm going to say, Corey, how did you experience me? How could I be better the next time we do this? So I'm asking for that. Number two, I read. I'm a voracious reader. I love to read the latest research and even some older research about high performance, about coaching, about behavior change. So I'm trying to fill my mind up with the very best thought leadership and be influenced appropriately by people that are experts, much better than me. The third thing is, and we talked about this quite a bit early on, is I'm always ready to practice. I'm always ready to, test it out or work on it. When I get new content, like at Mentor Group that we both serve, when I get that new deck, I typically will practice for a 90-minute session, Corey. I probably practice 8 hours. Probably practice, record myself, go through it. Then I actually practice with somebody and they'll correct me and give me feedback. So I think that's the third thing. The fourth thing is for high performers, the best high performers I know and how I aspire to get there, and people may not agree with this, is having this explicit sense of humility, this explicit sense of having a growth mindset that you mentioned earlier. That's why my purpose statement starts out with, I aspire to serve. I'm not there yet. So I think high performers that I know, and I've met, some I'm a golf nut. I love to follow golf. People have no idea how much those people practice. They have no idea, and yet if you talk to one of them, as you have talked to, whether it's fighting or boxing or you name it, people practice all the time. And they're trying to get better than they are. They're not satisfied. High performers are rarely satisfied with where they are. They always have a sense of who they are and where they need to improve, and they know how to go find the information to improve.
Yeah, and it's not that they aren't grateful. They have gratitude, most of them, but there's that drivenness, to continue to grow. So this is gold, because you said feedback, they embrace feedback. You said learning. So that learning orientation, that's how we grow, is learning.
That's right.
So whether it's success or failure, it's a result that we learn from and then figure out the things we need to do to improve future state.
That's right.
The other was practice. So how we show up and what we do. And there's in practice, there's preparation. There's a whole bunch of things.
That's right.
And that builds confidence. There's a whole bunch of things that spider off of that. And then your other piece was that groundedness. And you can't do those first three if you aren't grounded. And you had a different word for it.
Well, I aspire to serve. And that, part of that's my faith journey.
Absolutely.
Some people do, some people don't. I know people with no faith journey that are remarkably humble and gentle and are high performers, and they seek that out. But that's probably part of my own personal narrative, is that it comes from a sense of gratitude. It comes from a sense of humility and always being grateful for what I have and looking to see how I can serve. I think that's at the foundational part of who I am. I know when I'm serving, I see the results. They're positive. When I'm not serving, I'm outside of purpose, or I'm outside of my own integrity. And that's for another podcast. But I know where I am. I now have a emotional intelligence that continues to grow. I can tell you very quickly, Corey, if I'm like, Corey, I'm out of purpose here. This is now all about me. It's not about you. It's like facilitators. I'm a professional facilitator and proud of it. And I've worked hard at my craft, as you have. But a good friend of mine was a mentor 25 years ago, gave me a phrase that I never forgot. He said, there is a privilege to the platform. It is a privilege to be up in front of people. It's not an entitlement. It's not because I am so amazingly good or funny or clever or witty or an expert. First and foremost, I go there with a sense of humility that I've been given the privilege to be in front of these people. And it's all about them. It is not, when it starts to be about me, I'm not a good facilitator.
It's an off day the minute we do that. And
it's all about me.
I'm not ashamed, but I realize I've done that, and I've done that recently. There's times, that I'll fall back, and we all do. We can have a growth mindset the majority of the time, but there's saboteurs that we all have that are deeply wired.
And we choose those saboteurs. We invite them in, which is scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to close off our time today, I always like to ask this question. At your 100th birthday celebration, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want people saying about Bill Taylor, and who do you want there saying that for you?
Well, thank you for that question. You gave it to me yesterday, and I actually wrote it down because nobody ever asked me that in that particular way. And I hope, Corey, I hope and pray that people have experienced me over that period of time would say something to the effect, Bill Taylor is always an encourager of other people. That he always encouraged people to look deeper, to perform better, to be more caring and kind and humble. That, first of all, a encourager. Second thing would be that I was a man that loved mercy, that I wanted to be merciful, that I showed up with grace and mercy to people, and that I walked with humility, that I walked humbly, and that I also would be that I'm a man who is just, that is trying to be fair. So an encourager, a man who walks with justice in mind, fair treatment for everybody, that loves mercy, and walks humbly. I would hope and pray people would say that about Bill Taylor.
Well, Bill, it's interesting you bring those up, because as I've gotten to know you over the past year, I can sit here with integrity, and it gives me goosebumps to know like that you're thinking what all of us know about you, and you absolutely exude that. And I hope that for the listeners today on the podcast, they see that coming from you, because I count you as one of my mentors, Bill. I don't know if I've ever said that, and I know we are colleagues, but I value your character and your approach to life, and we've shared the personal stuff outside, and I think there's an alignment there. But I thank you, because you are all of those characteristics, and I am 100% confident that those will be the sorts of comments that will be said at the 100th birthday celebration. So thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Well, you just blessed me and gave me a gift. Thank you for this relationship, and thanks for this opportunity to have a conversation with you. And I hope that those that are listening in will consider some of what we've said. And hopefully we can leave them with something I think we both believe is that there's opportunity to become even better than you are right now, even better than you can imagine.